Welcome to the Sports Lunatics bonus show. I'm Shawn Lavigne in Halifax, Nova Scotia,
And I'm Howie Mooney here in Barrie, Ontario.
and you are watching the Sports Lunatics on YouTube or on the sportslunatics.com website, which is brand new. Please check it out. Also on the YouTube channel, like the video and subscribe to the channel. And we always welcome your comments or questions at the Sports Lunatics. Howie, before we get started on our topic for the bonus show, loving the jerseys. If you are watching, you're seeing a Reggie Jackson Oakland A's jersey, and of course, Hank Aaron and the Atlanta Braves jersey. Loving them behind you.
I live to give.
Well, we appreciate that. Howie, 50 years ago, this past week on
Uh,
September 20th, 1973, one of the biggest, most significant, and one of the most televised sporting events happened live from the Houston Astrodome. It was on ABC Sports because Howard Cosell was there. It,
unbelievably.
it was Billie Jean King versus Bobby Riggs, the battle of the sexes.
It was massive. It really was massive in 1973. And we have to give a little bit of background, though, because it didn't occur in a vacuum. It occurred as a result of a whole bunch of different things that preceded it. As we all know, the 60s, the 50s and 60s were a huge time for civil rights, for women's rights. The escalation and the I guess the battle just for human rights for minorities and for women. And you know, at the time in tennis, women's purses for championship tournaments were very, very small compared to the men. And I mean, that's a fight that still goes on today in different sports. But Billie Jean King was upset by that, and she started to demand that tournaments increase their purses for the women's side of the tournament. And little by little, they started to. I think in the year that Rod Laver won Wimbledon, he got £2,000 for winning the tournament. Billie Jean King won it, and she got £750. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. But Bobby Riggs had been a Wimbledon champion I think it was the 40s. He won in one year. He won the men's singles championship. He won the men's doubles championship, and he was on the mixed doubles winning team as well. It was not a grand slam, but he was a triple crown of Wimbledon that had never been done before, and up to the point of 1973, it had never been done since. But Bobby Riggs was of the opinion, being the male chauvinist pig, or playing the male chauvinist pig, the role of it, that women were not as good at tennis as men were, and therefore they should not receive as much money as the men do or did. This angered a lot of women, of course, and Billie Jean King spoke out against Riggs. Riggs challenged her to a match, winner take all. She said, "No, I don't need to play you." So he challenged Margaret Court, who was the reigning Wimbledon champion at the time, and he basically destroyed her on Mother's Day. Billie Jean King saw that and said, "Okay, I got to put this guy in his place." And you saw her accept the challenge from Bobby Riggs, and it turned into the huge spectacle and production that we saw in the Astrodome on September 20th, 1973.
90 million viewers to that match.
Unbelievable.
90 million
Yeah.
in 1973. 30,000, a little over 30,200 spectators at the Houston Astrodome. It was a spectacle. You can find highlights, documentaries. You might even find the whole match actually on YouTube.
Yes, you can.
And it is wild to watch. Just the pomp and circumstance. It was like a big boxing match, really. Like it just
you're right. You're absolutely right. It was.
It had that big build up. It was it was more than sports. It was entertainment. But as you said, there was an important underground of you know women's rights, and there was a lot of pressure on Billie Jean King. I think going into that match that she's she's playing for half of a society, which,
Yes,
which is wild to think about for someone, and she was a very accomplished player at that time, winning multiple Grand Slam titles. But there was a lot on the line for her. She had more to lose than Bobby Riggs did.
absolutely. And it's funny because before the spectacle, the spectacular took place, each player, each participant, Billie Jean King appeared on Johnny Carson. And the week after that, Bobby Riggs appeared on Johnny Carson. And Riggs was asked by Carson, "Do you like women?" He says, "I love women. I love them in the kitchen. I love them in the bedroom, all this stuff." It's like all this stuff. And Carson asked him, are you a hustler? Are you a con man? Is there a difference between the two? He says, and Riggs said, "I think I'm a little bit of both. I think I'm a little bit of both." And so you had that kind of atmosphere that you're absolutely right. It was like a boxing match. It was treated like that too in prime time on ABC with Howard Cosell and doing the commentary. You had Billie Jean King being carried in like Cleopatra on the giant couch or whatever by all the burly men. You had Bobby Riggs being wheeled in on a cart by his Bobby's bosom buddies, by women, and he had this giant sugar daddy chocolate bar or something that he was carrying in with him. But Billie Jean King did what Margaret Court couldn't do. She had a plan going in, and she was going to make Bobby Riggs run all over the court. And you saw, if you watched it, I mean, you were too young. You're 4 years old. I think you're too young to remember it. But she made him run, and she made him sweat, and he was worn out by the end of the match.
Well, he was 55 at the time
Yes.
of this match, and you're right. She was at the top of her game. I believe if she wasn't the number one player at that time, she was in the top five.
Yeah.
And like I said, winning multiple Grand Slam titles at that point as well. But this is where, and you brought up Bobby Riggs, and he never hid what he was.
No.
He never hid what he was. And which actually, if going back to the wrestling, you got the heel. He was the ultimate heel
Absolutely.
character in this big extravagant event. But when he lost, then he said why, the fix was in that essentially he lost the match on purpose. And that has been disputed by many people. But in light of, what he had said on Carson and the lead up, the type of individual he was, I think he liked to gamble. I think
You're right.
there was a lot of aspects to Bobby Riggs.
Well, going back to that Wimbledon where he won the Triple Crown at Wimbledon, he put 100 pounds down on himself and came back with 100,000 pounds.
Yes. So he's bet on himself a lot.
Yeah.
In his career, and that's unfortunately that sort of taints the actual, and we'll get into the importance of that event, but it did taint that victory a little bit from the standpoint of him claiming that really up until his dying day that the fix was in.
It's amazing though. Going back, I was 13 years old. I remember that night, and I remember watching it. And I mean, you're right. The heel that Bobby Riggs was, I was cheering for Billie Jean King too. I wanted her to beat this loudmouth, this loudmouth schnook. The guy, he was not likable, but at the same time, as you said, he was playing a role, and he was building up the match, and 90 million people watched it.
Yeah. And it changed a lot of things for women's sports. It has taken a long time for
Absolutely,
that to happen. to the point that there are still women's federations and professional leagues fighting to get what they feel, you know, it isn't even equal pay necessarily, but to still get more money than what, they really are getting. And so that's 50 years. That has been a 50-year fight. And to her credit, Billie Jean King has been there every step of the way. The impact that she has had on sports, not just women sports, but just on sports and society, you might be able to put a handful of people that have made that type of impact. We just had, ironically, it might have been the same day or right around the first professional women's hockey league.
Yes.
They held their draft, and Billie Jean King was there.
She's a part of it.
And she's a part of it.
Yeah.
And she has been a huge proponent of women's hockey and professional sport. There is now a professional women's hockey league. The WNBA has been around forever, but there's a league, unfortunately, that again, women are not even getting. I can't even say the percentage, but it's certainly. I'd be shocked if it's even a quarter of what men would make. So, but it's been around for 25 years. Like it's crazy that it's not lasted this long, but it's been around this long.
Well, it's one of the things that, and Billie Jean King can't claim credit for it, but you look at the NCAA and their sports, Title IX, it got the equal monetization
Right.
for women's sports and men's sports. And that all came out of that match from September 20th, 1973.
The impact of that night, again, if you're a younger, person watching or listening, you cannot understand the impact that event has had on sports and women's sports, especially. And it's a credit to Billie Jean King for sure.
Well, Billie Jean King was one of the spearheads, or one of the people that spearheaded world team tennis as well. And I think you're probably too young to remember world team tennis, but the song "Philadelphia Freedom" was about her team, the Philadelphia Freedom. That was her team in WT or World Team Tennis, WTT. But there were cities all over the world that had a team. I don't know how long the league lasted, but and I don't even know how they conducted their matches, but that was one of her ideas, and that came out in the 70s, shortly after her match with Bobby Riggs.
There was a battle of the sexes match. I believe it was Jimmy Connors and Martina Navratilova in the early 90s. It didn't have the same gusto or impact, of course, as the Battle of the Sexes from 1973 had. But look, there are women that have played on the professional golf tour. We've had women play in National Hockey League games, not regular season, but
Yep.
uh,
All-Star weekend.
Right. Yeah, especially in the NBA, WNBA, they've had a lot of cool moments with the WNBA players playing with NBA stars, which is cool to see. So, that one event has transcended sports so much, but there's still a ways to go. We still have soccer federations who are not paying women what they deserve. Women's hockey, it's great to have a professional league, but they still haven't caught up in many countries. Where Canada and US has all the money for their national teams. So there's a long way to go from that standpoint. But it was awesome to see the PWHL draft last week happen, and looking forward to their first season. 6 teams, 3 in Canada and 3 in the US. I guess we can call them the new original 6. But it'll be exciting, and it's great to see. So 50 years ago, September 20th, 1973.
I can't believe that much time has gone by since then. I mean, yes, I can, I guess, but it just feels like it wasn't 50 years ago. It feels like it was a shorter time ago.
It's funny how, and I'm going off the beaten path here a little bit, but you were talking about World Team Tennis. Think about some of the creations of sports leagues and ideas that were tried in the 70s. You know, you had the World Football League, you had the WHA, you had the Battle of the Sexes. The boxing matches were like the biggest thing you've ever seen in
Yeah.
terms of the hype and the buildup. It seemed like a decade where just let your imagination go wild. Like now, a lot of them did not last long, but at least they were given an opportunity to try. The ABA,
Yeah.
there's just so many different opportunities. It seemed in the 70s. I know in the 80s we can look back as well that there were some leagues as well that tried it. But the 70s would have been a cool time if I could remember it.
Well, the WHA, I mean, you look at the WHA opened up in 1972 and it lasted until 1979. And there were a lot of places, a lot of NHL owners that really despised the WHA because they were paying more money to their players. And the NHL guys like Harold Ballard couldn't keep their players. And they were always afraid that they were going to lose their players to this rival league. And they had a building, the Nassau County Coliseum in Long Island, was put up, and they had to put a team in there, an NHL team. The Rangers were balked at that idea at first, and then they realized if we don't put an NHL team there, the WHA is going to go in there, and they had to lobby for that for the Islanders franchise because of things like that.
Yeah. No, it was a wild time. It was. It just seemed like you can experiment and try anything,
Yeah.
and see if it worked. And some of it did, and some of it didn't. I'll actually say ABC Sports. They broadcasted the Battle of the Sexes in '73. You know what they did on the television landscape and how they changed the course of sports and how you watched a wide world of sports and
Monday Night Football.
Monday Night Football. There was just so much innovation, and for that time, it was like it would have blown your mind.
The Pro Bowlers Tour.
Hey, it's true.
Saturday afternoons were Pro Bowlers Tour.
Absolutely. Ironically, I bowled on Friday. I was terrible, but it was the thing to watch though on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah,
It was a great time.
it
Great
was.
time in sports history. And that is the conclusion of the Sports Lunatics bonus show. I'm Shawn Lavigne in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
I'm Howie Mooney in Barrie, Ontario. And Shawn, whenever you say the words bonus show, I always think of Gene Rayburn and the long microphone. And I don't know why, but
I do not have a match game question for you, though, Howie. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared for that. Again, check out thesportslunatics.com. Check us out on YouTube, The Sports Lunatics. And please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comments and questions before. What are your memories of the Battle of the Sexes back in 1973 and just the course of women's sports today? What do you love about it? What needs to be improved? That's great. Thanks, Howie. Loved it again today.
thank you, Shawn.
All right. Have a great sports day, everybody.